lot of people who are chasing Russian assets or chasing Russian shadow tankers or chasing Russian financial transactions are gone. Right, so the sanctions regime every day is weaker and weaker and weaker. Without it's been officially demolished or destroyed. It's been destroyed from within by Elon Musk and his acolytes.
Couple of other practical suggestions of things that could be done right now to help Ukraine. First of all, is this not finally the time to seize the frozen Russian assets and to use them to fund Ukraine's defense?
Because it is a very desperate situation, but also it is a force majeure of incredible level, right? This is not some kind of a grab of money for no reason. And over the last 3 years, there were quite significant international law experts coming up with quite a credible plan of how this could happen without jeopardizing the Western kind of financial markets and the standing of dollar or Europe as reserve currencies. It is a risky proposition on one hand, and yet at the same time, we already know there have been a number of legal experts with huge level of expertise who proposed a fairly decent way of doing it without damaging the reputation of Brussels, Paris, London, Frankfurt as financial markets. So I think this is the way, another very crucial kind of screw that Europe can kind of start using against Moscow.
I suppose one of the practical difficulties with doing it is given all the messaging coming out of the White House currently, they are unlikely to be in favour of it. And if the European countries decided to seize those assets and use it to fund Ukraine's defence, is there not a risk that the US lifts some economic sanctions on Russia?
It is very plausible that will happen anyway, first of all. And I think what is even more important is that the dismantling of the American central state by Elon Musk and his dodgy department has already led to the to the gradual ease of sanctions regime, because there are no enough officials left in finance departments, in enforcement regimes who are capable of doing that. So they're sucking people left, right, and center, and they're sucking people disregarding their expertise. So a lot of people who are chasing Russian assets or chasing Russian shadow tankers or chasing Russian financial transactions are gone. Right, so the sanctions regime every day is weaker and weaker and weaker. Without it's been officially demolished or destroyed. It's been destroyed from within by Elon Musk and his acolytes.
The other practical suggestion I wanted to put to you is this idea that now is the time for Ukraine to lower the conscription age below 25. And look, I know it's very easy for me as a British person sitting here in a warm studio in London to suggest that the Ukrainian youth should be sent out to fight and die on the front line. But is that the reality of the situation we're now facing, Vlad?
Absolutely true. Total mobilization is what is a necessity, perhaps encouraging also female fighters to join the front line. Probably you would go even further than that. You would probably reconsider the non-proliferation treaty that Ukraine signed in 1994, that was supposed to be guaranteed by the US, UK, France, and Russia, and with Chinese support. That is one way of deterring future invasion. It sounds quite horrible, but I think desperate times call for desperate measures, and there is already enough of the capacity to deliver particular warheads 1,000 miles away from Kiev. So I think there is a way of making a decision now and try to testing the nuclear weapons that Ukraine surely is capable of producing.
What do you think Vlad Zelensky should do about the minerals deal with the US, which a lot of people expected to be signed last Friday when he went to Washington? We all know why that wasn't signed on that day. Then on Sunday evening, he gave an interview in which he suggested he was still prepared to sign it. But now we've had the pausing of US military aid. Should he still sign that deal?
As far as I understand, we are still deciphering the choreography of that Friday disaster day in Oval Office. But listening to the U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent recently, who kind of revealed some, and also the David Lutnick, the trade secretary. They revealed a few interesting, intriguing parts of that discussion that we haven't seen on the television screens, obviously. Is that, as far as I understand, James, and you've been having these discussions for the last 3 days, is that President Zelensky was forced to sign a capitulation to Moscow prior to the mineral deal being agreed, because Scott Bessent talked about sequencing being peace deal first, then economic deal second. And of course, we haven't seen a peace deal being in any form or shape. What we've heard previously from the US officials like Steve Witkoff uh, is that the so-called Istanbul declaration was supposed to be the basis of that. And Istanbul declaration of 2022 was a surrender capitulation agreement, that not agreement, the offer to capitulate and surrender that Moscow gave to Ukraine back then when the Russian troops were near Kiev or in Kiev itself. So it looks like the American administration has tried to use the surrender offer Moscow gave Ukraine in April 2022, again as a prior deal before the not very significant minerals deal. And I think that probably actually started the whole well, that fire emitting. I think that was set off by the capitulation offer.
Where do you stand on the principle of the deal? Because you could argue it two different ways. You could say, look, this is mercantilism, this is colonialism from the US, exploiting Ukraine in its hour of need, attempting to extract more of Ukraine's GDP than was extracted from Germany after the end of World War One. I mean, it is a pretty shocking state of affairs. The counter argument would be, indeed, an argument that Trump himself has advanced, which is, look, if you have American contractors on the ground tapping into Ukraine's mineral resources, that will be a disincentive against Putin launching further aggression against Ukraine. How do you see those two arguments, Vlad?
I haven't read the draft agreement that we've all seen been released by the Financial Times and a few other outlets. Well, it's a framework agreement that doesn't have much teeth in it, apart from the fact that Ukraine will have to commit 50% of its mineral resources to a reconstruction fund, which doesn't seem to be too bad, meaning that 50% will be taken over by the US, which is, as you said, fairly tough. Yet the level of mineral wealth, the types of rare earth and minerals, critical minerals, is all kind of a very unclear situation, given we don't know how much, how long it will take, decades and decades to do, to require enormous amount of private capital. So I'm not entirely worried about the minerals deal as it stands. Uh, and I understand that in our kind of dreams, it would be great to give Trump some kind of a deal so he can throw it to MAGA supporters saying, I've got 350 billion out of thin air. That was our probably big hopes. But it looks like that comes with the capitulation surrender to Moscow, because we haven't seen any actually discussion in the US or what this peace deal is, right? What are they discussing with Moscow about, apart from opening the spy factories, which is the called Russian embassy, mega embassy in the US, right? So they're discussing the reestablishment of diplomatic relations on the sites that was shut down in 2022. But we haven't seen what the Russians are offering, what the Americans are pushing them to. So I think switching sides is exactly uh, perfect description, because effectively they are now working together with Moscow to push Ukraine to surrender, and that's exactly how we should look at it.
Do you fear that they may achieve it?
I don't feel that may achieve it, because it's not Zelensky that's the problem, right? It's Ukrainian people that's the problem. And what do they? I mean, literally, what do they expect? Do they expect to get rid of an annoying, heroic war figure, and to get some kind of a less annoying heroic war figure? I mean, the National Intelligence Directorate, before Tulsi Gabbard took over that office, knew perfectly well that the second most popular politician in Ukraine is is Ukrainian ambassador to the UK, General Zaluzhny, right? And is General Zaluzhny will be more willing to sign a surrender agreement? I would doubt that. And apart from Zaluzhny and Zelensky, there are other letters in Ukrainian alphabet, James, not just Z. But those two effectively now occupy the Ukrainian political spectrum, and none of them is willing to surrender. And hence, I don't quite see how removing Zelensky and installing somebody else, or even democratically installing somebody else, will going to help Putin and Trump to work through the Ukrainian problem.
And how popular is Zelensky in Ukraine at the moment? Because we've seen all this disinformation from Trump saying that he's unpopular and calling him a dictator because they haven't held elections. In reality, how popular is he among ordinary Ukrainians currently?
The latest opinion, the latest established and trusted opinion polls we had was in early February, before all this happened. And back then, Zelensky had an approval rate, a net approval rating of plus 20%, and an approval rating of 57%, which was above Trump's 45. So obviously, coming down from 99% in February 2022, it is a big climb down to 57%. But still, you have the majority of people trusting you, and I bet now his approval ratings are much higher than that, because there is obviously rallying around the flag, as you would expect. So I would suspect his approval rank is now probably reaching 2/3 of the population, and that means his position is very strong domestically, which means that he will be less willing to surrender to the most bizarre demands from Washington, D.C. and Moscow.
Just finally, Vlad, what is your message for Ukraine's European allies? This is clearly the moment to step up, but what does stepping up look like? What would you like to hear more of from Starmer, Macron, Merz, Mark Rutte, the key figures in Ukraine's European allies?
I mean, they're obviously trying to patch up the relationship between Kiev and Washington, D.C., which is fine if they can do it, if they can use any leverage that they can have. Giorgia Meloni has offered her help. She is the only far-right politician in Europe that is pro-Ukrainian and also has some friends in America. So Giorgia Meloni could be a bridge of some kind, if possible. The main thing is to effectively try to buy up some time, right? Try to get U.S. weapons one way or another, whether to buy them directly from Americans. I would hope they would not bar that. Get Ukrainian weapons, get American weapons somehow. Try to push up the relations as you are restructuring the security infrastructure, knowing what is going to happen anyway, knowing that Article 5 doesn't exist anymore.
Vlad, we always appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us again on Frontline.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for watching today's episode of Frontline. For early access to our videos, member-only Q&As and live streams, then sign up for a membership via the link in the description. And for the latest news and breaking stories, listen to Times Radio and follow us at thetimes.com.